Thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. My name is Tony Cuneo. I'm the Executive Director here at Zeitgeist Center for Arts and Community. We can't say enough about how appreciative we are that you are here and a part of this discussion. We are here today to talk about great spaces and the impact they have on community. At Zeitgeist, our objective, our work, is to weave values of creativity and inclusivity and connection into the fabric of our community. And when you hear that metaphor, hopefully it elicits a sense of wanting to do long-lasting work, that if those values are woven into the fabric of our community, then those values should be a part of our community for a long, long time to come. And when we talk about third spaces and public infrastructure and great spaces, those are ways of embedding those values into our community for a long time. When I think about some of my favorite spaces here in Duluth, I think about Chester Park Drive, I think about Gitche King Park, and those are spaces that are permanent or semi-permanent infrastructure, right? They're going to last for a long time. I think about Gitche as an example, a space full of public art, embedding that idea of creativity and cultural expression into our shared public spaces. It is literally a connection. It is a park that is woven into our transportation infrastructure, connecting the Lake Walk in Canal Park with downtown Duluth. I think about the aspects of it that are inclusive. It is a park designed for people of all ages, all mobilities. At its best, I'll go in there, I'll go outside during lunch on a nice summer day, and there's kids from summer camps at the Playhouse or here at Zeitgeist interacting and running around and playing, while elders from Graceland or other parts of downtown are enjoying a park bench. It's inclusive in the way that the art is telling stories of multiple cultures and demographic backgrounds from our community. And so, as you all are thinking about your favorite public places in Duluth or throughout the world, take a moment. I think everyone got Post-it notes, is that right, as they came in, or maybe you were working on them out there. But the idea is we want to understand your favorite places, and we want to understand on those Post-it notes what characteristics of those places make them so great, so that we can take that knowledge and continue to embed it in all the work that we do. All right, before we get too far, we couldn't do this work, obviously, without support from our community, and so I want to say thank you to our sponsors. I want to say thank you to Aspira St. Luke's, the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Bike and Men, to Clayton, to Conservation Minnesota, to Duluth Aging Support, to the Duluth Transit Authority, the DTA, to JS Print Group, to LISC Duluth, the Mardag Foundation, MPECU, National Bank of Commerce, Northland Foundation, SHIP, St. Louis County Public Health, United Healthcare, Vibrant Streets Duluth, local chapter of Bike and Men, and the Whole Foods Co-op. Please give them all a round of applause. Know that those are companies and organizations that are supporting this work and supporting those values in our community, so thank you to them. Thank you also to all of you. If you were here with us last year, you may recall that it was about 1,003 degrees in this room. Thanks to the support of our sponsors, to everyone in this room and everyone in our community who makes donations to Zeitgeist. We were able to do things like replace the compressor unit and cool this space. So thank you to everyone. Please consider Zeitgeist as you think about your charitable donations. I want to say thanks. I know I did not get the full registration list, so I'm not prepared to list every elected official or person who's running for elected office's names. But I do appreciate that you're here, and I wonder if I could just ask anyone who is currently in office or is running for office to stand up just for a moment so that at least everyone in the room can know that you are here. Thank you. Please look around and recognize those people and say thanks to them for being here and being a part of this conversation and for caring about these issues in their public service. Lastly, I will welcome our keynote panelists today. R.T. Rybak, President and CEO of the Minneapolis Foundation, former Mayor of Minneapolis, and direct from the great city of Cleveland, Evelyn Burnett, co-founder and CEO of ThirdSpace Action Lab. I think we're going to hear more about each of the panelists and Mayor Reinert and Councilor Garner Moffat, who will be here as well as some of the other panelists as they come on stage and introduce themselves. But I will start by handing the mic over to Evelyn. Thanks so much. Welcome, Evelyn.
Hey, everybody. Okay, good. I was wondering what type of crowd y'all were going to be. Give yourselves a round of applause. Again, I'm Evelyn. We bring greetings from Cleveland, Ohio, Akron, Ohio. Can't forget my man Curtis. Really proud of Akron. You know, LeBron James is there. That's from there. That's what he always says. Atlanta, all over. So we're really, really honored to be here. I'm really honored to be in conversation with the former mayor. I have a quick story. I used to work at a place called Living Cities. What feels like, I never thought I'd be old enough to say it, 20 years ago. But here we are. Yeah, it seems like it happens a lot. And this was the first mayor that I ever met outside of my own mayor from my little hometown of Youngstown. He had a profound impact on what I thought mayors do and what foundations do and philanthropy and all these sorts of things. So it really feels like a full circle moment to be in conversation with you. So thank you. I know the Sandman will come sooner than I think, so are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Okay. So at ThirdSpace, we do something called a soul check. Doesn't matter who we're talking to, doesn't matter how important the person is. We think it's really important to check in on the soul at the start of any conversation. Oh, there's your mic. Okay. And so I have a two-part soul check question for you today. If you could describe your soul today, how you're feeling as a piece of art, it could be any type of art, music, visual art, what would it be and why? And then the second part of the soul check is, what is keeping you up at night and what is keeping you hopeful? That's how we do it, y'all.
I think a way to describe, is this on or not? Let's see here. How about now? Yeah. No? Okay, well. An artist I really love is McGhie, the sculptor. And the sculptures do not move in a linear fashion, and they are organic. And they move where they need to. I say that because, just off the cuff, when you ask that question, I don't actually know how I can define where my soul is right now. Because there are huge things that warm my soul, our two grandchildren, the fact that I get to work with great people, the fact that I'm almost 70 and I get to do meaningful work. I get to live in Minneapolis and I get to visit my second favorite city in the world, which is Duluth. All of that is great. And I don't say that in Masika or anywhere. I love Duluth. Is this true, Mayor? Yes, I love Duluth. And we are in a moment where I think there's some authoritarian, racist stuff going on. And I've come to realize it's not a political moment, it's a cultural moment and a movement moment. And so I go back to civil rights periods. This gets into what's keeping me up. Civil rights periods and anti-war periods, and recognizing that too many people are looking around and waiting for this person to lead us out of this complex period of time. And you should all look in the mirror, because every single person can be part of a cultural moment and a social movement that, regardless of your ideology, should recognize the kindness and humanity and the ability for everyone to belong across the globe, which is a role this country has tried to play imperfectly over time, is something that should be the counter movement. And how's that?
minute. This was exactly where I wanted to go. So just to kind of transition us into some questions, and thank you all for really valuable questions and feedback. We sent out surveys, and it's like my mom fills out the survey and a couple others, but the Zeitgeist team, which shout out to the Zeitgeist team. You guys gave really, really, really great questions, so you kind of did the work for me. But I wanted to ask one that didn't come up, about your transition from being a mayor, at a time when you were mayor, to being a foundation president. What that transition was like for you, and how you take what you experienced as a political leader into the philanthropic space, and what does that look like for you today?
You know, on some level, I've been a journalist and an entrepreneur and a mayor, and I led the Education Equity Initiative, and I run a foundation. It's all civic work, and it's basically place-based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I love to live too. And so it, on one level, wasn't that big a change. I think it was a bigger change after George Floyd was murdered. And it was really important to sort of check who I was in that moment, in that place, as a white man who had a big fat title, running a big organization in a moment where it was important for me to elevate and support other leaders. I also just got back from something, please don't laugh when I say this name, okay, because I did when I heard it. I got invited to a meeting about a group called White Men for Racial Justice. And a couple people in my office sort of laughed and said, are you going to go to this place, and are they going to do drumming? And my mom didn't breastfeed, so therefore I tried to dominate everybody, you know, whatever, you know, right? No, it was really powerful, because it really talked about the fact that no one should use their privilege to stand back and only leave it to everyone else, any more than you would like say to your kids, hey, here's the keys to the house. I didn't tell you the boiler is exploding and the roof is leaking, right? It is important for everybody to get off the bench and do more. So I've really been calibrating back and forth how I show up and win. Do you want to talk about Duluth?
Yeah, sure.
I tell you, I love
my Oprah moment. Okay, so let's talk about third places.
Okay.
And what is a third place to you? What's your definition? And what are some of your favorite third places?
Well, third place to me, I'm not saying this because I'm here, but I think this is a great example. But I remember being with Mayor Ness and now Mayor Reinert and a couple other councilors, and when this was opening, I think it was just barely opening, and I thought, is this a restaurant? Is it a movie theater? Is it a place you can drop in? It's all of those. And I think third spaces have been identified because they've been so unusual. And now when we're really looking to not have our cities be as linear, here's the office core, here's the entertainment, here's the restaurant, here's the housing, that it's really about all of that. Third space should really be a combination of all of those. I do think Duluth has done a wonderful job over the last few decades in having the most phenomenal amenity open up. Obviously the lake and the creek and all these other wonderful things. But what does that mean when we're inside is a really, really complicated thing. I'm incredibly proud of the fact that my city of Minneapolis, when settlement began, captured the most beautiful places, and they belong to everyone. And if you go to Naples, Florida, they have beautiful places, and every single one of them is locked behind a gated community. That's the fight we're in, and that's why I think public space outdoors and public space, more complicated indoors, third spaces is so important.
I appreciate you sharing that, because when I was first introduced to the concept of third places, the kind of Ray Oldenburg sociological definition, it had a justice, it landed to me in a justice orientation, because this idea that there's your first place, which is usually your home, your second place, which is work or church, but that all humans deserve these third places where you can just be. And growing up in Youngstown, I wasn't really sure what those type of places were. Youngstown, Akron, Cleveland. And there's something about the paywall right, that these third places can have that prevents belonging, or the belongingness that I think a lot of us are trying to achieve in our work. So how have you, either in your capacity as mayor or now in your role as a philanthropic leader, support more third places in cities and communities across the country, or particularly here in Minnesota?
Well, a couple of different ways. I've also been doing a lot of work in Rochester just as a volunteer for the past decade. I just rolled off what's called the Destination Medical Center Board. So you've got Mayo Clinic surging forward with all of this, but we've really focused on the connective tissue between the park and the riverfront and the common ground, but we haven't really navigated what that indoor third space is. You're going to Rochester tomorrow, that's one. I would say that there are a number of ways we have supported that in all sorts of different gathering spaces. I couldn't necessarily pick one off the top of my head in the work we've done at the foundation. But I would say, I want to just suggest one here. Could I step way out of my lane and actually talk about downtown Rochester, downtown Duluth for a second? I've spent some time, come here a lot, and I've just taken this walk on it. And there is an outdoor third space, obviously, right behind this building. And there is a much more viable Main Street than in a lot of places right now. Superior is, don't beat yourself up about where this downtown is. This is actually doing pretty good. But one of the things that is a real gap is those two places don't connect. And they connect, I mean, you can take that walkway. But if you really go down 2 blocks to First, and you really look at that blank gap there, the ability to do something there that is really welcoming and inclusive and celebrates the lake, especially 1 block from the great memorial you're about to hear from them. Imagine going there and people from around the world would go to Gitchigumi and see, for instance, maybe the interpretation of what this means as a sacred space to Native people. Imagine going to that space as part of the experience of being on Superior. There are huge physical redevelopments communities can do, but sometimes that really can blend the experience of I'm at Accenture and I want to walk down for lunch, or I am shopping or I'm living on this space. Where do we all come together? And certainly Canal Park and other pier and all that, but this is the main place. But where is the main place everyone belongs? Right in the center of town. And to me, that, if I could do one thing in Duluth, it'd be that.
Can you say more about the importance of the center of town? I think I know where you're going from.
Yeah. I work in the IDS Center in Minneapolis, which is a private space, but it operates as a third space. So there's this huge crystal court, and I go in and out of there every day, and the wealthiest people in the state of Minnesota, and some of the poorest, and a whole lot of people in between all go there and all belong there. At sunset, when I go to B'day-Makaska in Minneapolis, there are some extraordinarily expensive homes near it. But on it, you see every community together. And when you really look at the dynamic of belonging, when you have places that people come together, there's something there. There's very good research on people who are closer to these more mixed places and their willingness to talk about belonging. When I went to Sweden, at one point the EU did a thing on security and they wanted me to come and talk about why Somalis were doing better in Minneapolis than in Stockholm. I thought, wow, Stockholm, you know, all the social network and all the great stuff they do. And I said, bring me to where the Somalis are. There wasn't any Somalis I could see at all in downtown Stockholm with a huge population. So we drove like 157 miles or something way, way out to this beautiful housing complex that was basically a suburban ghetto. And when you look at this moment we're in right now, and you track it back to COVID, and you track it back to how we felt when we were locked in, and then when you came back out, we lost a lot of belonging. Remember how tough it was to go into a crowd again? And we've really got to very intentionally create opportunities to see someone different, to connect with them, to bump into them, to somehow observe them from a distance, whatever, not other them. We are in an othering world in desperate need of together places.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to go to some of the questions that we received. The first one was about how we can help the city of Duluth to implement research-based ideas instead of status quo guidelines, which have given us the results that don't work well.
Well, again, I'm a big fan of Duluth, and I'm a fan of some of the intentional things that have happened in Duluth, and also some of the things that have just happened. You know, Lincoln Park and all of that kind of stuff was not as directed as Canal Park. But both, I think, are additive. This building and others. I think there's some really great things that have been done. I want to unpack that word research-based because I get it. I want to see places that are successful, but I don't think there's going to be a metric you can find on that. So I think what you really need to do, there is a feeling, and it's very abstract, that I think you simply have to feel and touch it. I think you should build from an asset frame here, not just because that's just the way I like to think, but there are huge assets here. And so what I think you have is a couple anchors on this street. You have Accenture, and you have Fitkers and that whole area. You come down the street, it's really strong through here. You've got some buildings that connect and don't connect and are kind of a little mixed there. You've got the Skyway. I think Skyways are a necessary element in our element, but I really think we should think about Skyway Highway. What is what we need, and let's get rid of everything else we don't need. And to do that, to really, really animate the street more. But Duluth is an incubator for innovators. It's always been that. You know, I just got back from Duluth Coffee Shop. I was talking to my new best friend Cheryl over here with the great lighting store down there. I mean, it's a wonderful street to walk down. Just invest in those individual entrepreneurs. The 2% loan program we've used in the city of Minneapolis, the huge efforts we did after rebuilding after George Floyd's murder were all focused on grassroots entrepreneurship. And I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel here. I think there's that one physical idea I mentioned, but mostly let Duluth be Duluth, and these incredible entrepreneurs coming in make sense. I do think there's a need to figure out a way to make this more logical for people. I always map out tours, but I almost think of something like Duluth is Superior, meaning obviously the lake, but the whole street is a series of villages. And I think right now, perceptually, they compete with each other. And instead to really look at that, we're doing a campaign in Minneapolis right now, visitlakestreet.org. And Lake Street is from the Damacoska to Mississippi River. It includes the uptown area, it includes all sorts of different areas. Sorry, stick my hand in front of your face. And let's see how it works, but I do think that Duluth is Superior idea about not having that compete, but create a new narrative about these are a series of villages. You don't have to internalize all at once, but you've got phenomenal entrepreneurs up and down the street. Invest in more.
I'm glad you went there. The next question was about the best tools for equipping business owners or residents to activate spaces on their own without government, I would add, or philanthropic funding. And you talked about us looking in the mirror, and I think a lot of us are feeling in this socio-political context, like, what do I do? You know, what's within my control? Where can I help? And so, how would you answer that question?
Well, I wouldn't pull philanthropy out. Where's my friend Sean here from Borealis? Okay, you're not exempted from this, Sean, but I think you would want to be. But one of the things that, after George Floyd was murdered, you can imagine how many initiatives there were in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it was wonderful to have that, but it was paralyzing because there were so many. Now they've all gravitated into one, and I think there's something that we learned from this can be translated. We got the banks to the table, we got philanthropy to the table, we got government to the table, and said to the banks, why are you not doing more loans to black entrepreneurs and black homeowners, okay? Really specific.
Period.
And they said, okay, here is the risk factor. We said, okay, can you come this far in your risk factor and philanthropy fill in here? Why should philanthropy fill in? Because of the Littlejohn family. They were a family that had a lot of property, black family, entrepreneurs. They happened to be in Tulsa during the attack on Black Wall Street. They would have had multi-generational wealth. They did not. So philanthropy filled in that role. And we worked with successful nonprofits. You've worked with a bunch here. NDC, I think, has done some work up here, and some of the others. We always work with people more proximate than us on that. But I believe, the 2% loan program I mentioned from the city of Minneapolis also understood cultural needs like riba-free loans for people of the Islamic faith, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's tremendous things you can do on that, but don't exempt foundations. Do look at the idea of impact investing much more, where people can get a little less return on their money. I would start with the people who have incomes over $4 million who are getting a tax break of $400,000 in this latest tax bill. That's a weird idea. But if they would take that $400,000 and invest in these other entrepreneurs, this gift they're getting that I don't think we should necessarily be giving them, that could be a strategy for people who don't agree with that, with enough resources. Get a little less than you would in a bank and get a hell of a lot more in your community.
The Sandman is coming. No, this is great. You mentioned your background in journalism. And so my last question before we invite our next esteemed panelist to the stage is, what is the role, and let me add a little bit more context. The murder of George Floyd, which I appreciate you naming it that way, impacted millions and millions of people, like important turning point, and shaped and changed and contorted narrative for many of us. What is the role of narrative change, especially when we're thinking about creating third places, expanding third places, all of our various roles in third places? What is the role of narrative change in that work?
I'm so glad you mentioned narrative change, because I thought you were going to ask about media and journalism, which is super important, but start with narrative change and then back out. And I think on some levels, it is really incumbent on people, you create your own narrative. So that little thing I did about the Superior thing, or when I talk about downtown Minneapolis, I talk about the villages of downtown. When you look at race and culture, it's a whole different complicated thing. Who's telling the story, who gets to tell the story. However, I think we have to recognize that narrative is organic. It doesn't stay, and it shouldn't stay. And we can learn history and relearn history and relearn history, and we should. And so the immediate moment is to understand how that narrative is evolving and either disrupt it or not. The disruption of the narrative of selfishness, I think, is super important right now. The acceleration of the narrative of whose land you're on, whose equity built this country and physical labor built this country. So I think people have to get into that stream and swim. Some are journalists with official platforms. Most now, you've got your platforms on your phone. Use them in the multiple different places, and don't stand by and complain about other people creating the narrative. That's your job too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can you guys join me in a That's how you do Hump Day. Okay, if you could also join me in welcoming our next panelists. This is our local panel with Henry Banks and Camp Kruger. Please come on. So I think we're in for a real treat. It's already been a treat. So I'm going to ask you a question and then really hand the mic off. I'm hoping that we can start with a similar soul check about how your soul is feeling, if you can describe it as art or anything, right? But just how are you doing today? How are you feeling as you come into this space? And then I hope you all can introduce yourself and the work that you do and your connection to ThirdSpaces and the work that you do. I'll remind you, but I'm handing you the mic, okay?
So I will start. Thank you very much. I'm so grateful and honored to be here today. My name is Henry Banks. My soul is weary and worn and tired. And this journey, for me as an African heritage man, has been a journey that I would not wish on anyone. But I still have hope that America will be one day the country we would all love it to be and expect it to be. And so that's where I'm at right now in my life.
I don't know how to follow that up, Henry, because I agree with everything you're saying. Maybe I feel inspired by a packed room full of people that care about making things better in the world. I think where I am putting my soul right now is in micro communities and in passionate people and in not trusting so much in systems that other people maybe haven't trusted in for years, and I'm just getting there right now, but in the community that I built together with other people and sunshine.
Coming from Cleveland, I understand. So, can I just want
I'm
to,
going to share that mic.
I'm going to come to you. Oh, okay, we'll figure this out. Okay. I want to, Mr. Banks, I had the opportunity of meeting Mr. Banks yesterday at the Coffee and Conversations. And we have a tradition at ThirdSpace we've been doing for about almost 4 years now, called Intergenerational Lunches. And they started off as us just sitting at the feet of the elders and reminiscing on the good old days, as we described it. And that was really important. Again, shout out to my team from ThirdSpace, including our People's Practice team. Hope folks will check out the website. But one of the things we talk about a lot in the People's Practice is this idea that there are no blank slates. Folks are often coming into our community to do development as if there's a blank slate. We heard the former mayor kind of talk about this. And it really was an honor and a privilege to be with you yesterday. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today. And anybody with any sense knows you can't do anything in this world without the guidance and protection and wisdom of the elders. So I just want to say that to you in front of this room of people. And thank you for what you've done at this memorial. That is extraordinarily powerful and important. But before you tell us more about it, I don't know if you all have the same piece of paper that I have, but it's very important that Mr. Banks is a historian and an educator and a cultural consultant and a community organizer that plays this important role in the school district. We know our schools are under attack, among many, many other things, and that you did something so important and scary for many people. So I'm hoping what you all have in the context of who you have before you, you could tell us the story about why this was important, how it came to be, and again, its role as a third place.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I want folks to know, some of you may not know this, the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial in Duluth was the first memorial of its type in the United States. That's why I love Duluth so much. And that's why I want Duluth to be an even better place for all of us. The first in the country by 15 years. The National Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama came far after the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial in Duluth. And it was a group of people who came together from all walks of life. It wasn't just Black people doing this. It was a cross-section of Duluthians and regional people that wanted to take something that was mean and malicious and mine it into something beautiful. And that's exactly what we did. And we made sure that as we were planning and developing and building this memorial, that we were inclusive and that all perspectives were certainly welcomed. And even when we were selecting and building the momentum for the quotes that are in the memorial, That was a 3-month process because I wanted to make sure the community had buy-in even with the quotes. And so that's why this is such an important space, because it's inclusive. We never shut anybody out. We welcomed anybody that wanted to be a part of the memorial and the project as it moved forward to be a part of it. If you have skills that you want to share, be a part of it. And that's how we envisioned the memorial. And again, it was a cross-section of people from the early start of the memorial. It went from 7 people to a 45-member committee. And we had to break it down into about 8 different subcommittees in order to get the job done effectively for the community. And it worked.
Before we come to Cameron, I just wanted to, for folks that haven't visited, and I hope you will end that today, if that's you, what is the memorial representing? What happened, and why is it important that it exists?
So 3 young African-American men, Clayton, Jackson, and McGhie, Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGhie, were accused of raping a white woman by the name of Irene Tuscan. Irene Tuscan and her then boyfriend, Louis Sullivan, had to concoct a story about the situation. So a traveling circus was here, and a lot of the workers were black men, black young people who were there to set up and take down this traveling circus. Irene Tuscan and her then boyfriend Louis were at the circus. They were there to have fun. Now, you should know that Irene's parents did not like Louis Sullivan. They didn't want her having anything to do with him. He had lots of money, he had a great job, and we believe because he had a great job, he must have said something to her like, well, you know, I can get any girl, right? So she fell for it. And so they went down in the ravine out on Wheeler Field is where it happened. They came back up, her shirt or blouse was disheveled and had dirt on it, and they had to concoct a story about what happened because she was not supposed to be with him. And a lineup of a number of African-American men, it's just a lineup. Choose 3 of them. Clayton, Jackson, McGhie were chosen. And it was based on a lie because the rape didn't happen. The family doctor checked her out. No evidence of anything of the sort. So these 3 young men lost their lives. They were dragged up 2nd Avenue East and 1st Street to their ultimate death. And so we decided as a committee then and then a board later that we again wanted to take this incident and turn it into something beautiful with this memorial, which is one of the best places to be in downtown Duluth, in this part of the state, for what it means and what its purpose is. It's about coming together. That's why this memorial was done. But these men, their lives were taken over something that didn't happen.
Thank you. It is a beautiful contemplative site. So we appreciate the ground that you've laid. Thank you again. Cameron, wanted to come to you. I know hard act to follow, but we're very excited to hear from you. So I'd love for you to, one, just tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of what inspires your work. You have a very impressive background. We're not going to read bios. But I also wanted to talk particularly about the Lincoln Park Pocket Park.
It's a mouthful.
And its role in strengthening community through culturally responsive public spaces. And I thought that was just really quick, I thought that was an interesting way of kind of describing, when I talk to people in my family, they don't use the word jargon, but they mean jargon. And don't know what a lot of the things that we talk about. So I'm also hoping that you could talk a little bit about what it means for something like Lincoln Park to be culturally responsive.
That's a great question. Well, the first thing I will say is that my first dabbling in placemaking happened in the Central Hillside as a teenager with Henry as largely a mentor and guide, and so it's fun to be on stage with him right now at this point in my career. I am the administrator for the Lincoln Park Business Group. The Lincoln Park Business Group has existed for over 100 years and was responsible in the 90s for renaming West End to Lincoln Park with the idea of transformation, of thinking very differently about what that meant, and also our sort of community confusion that still exists today of like what's West Duluth, what's West End, where do the lines go? So I will tell you where the lines go, from the rocks to the docks and from the shoreline to the skyline. So that's, if you want to remember. And then post that, sort of post-industrial era became more of an infrastructure for retail and manufacturing and crafting, this idea of a craft district. And so I wouldn't have used the word cultural responsive if I had been the one designing all of this. But there was a lot of intentionality around. There were some views about what Lincoln Park is and was at that time about drug use and crime and whether they were true or not in people's experiences. I grew up on the Central Hillside, and that was, I think, maybe a more intense place than Lincoln Park at various times in our history for those types of things. And so to help counteract that perspective, a lot of community work was done in trying to beautify the neighborhood. And so that was a lot of mural making, which occurred over the course of a few years. And then the Pocket Park was a project in 2018 that was engaging local artists in creating a space that was going to be really our gathering space outside in Lincoln Park. And there was already a park there that Parks and Rec had, and it needed a lot of attention. And was maybe a place that was gathering a lot of trash and just not being cared for in a way that really felt meaningful to our district. Now I will say on top of that, so my role before becoming administrator was I was the CEO for the Children's Museum here in town. And what I wanted to do was continue to encourage development in Lincoln Park that felt community oriented. And so bringing the Children's Museum onto Superior Street, right into the district, out of the Clyde Park development where we were, so that we were right in the heart of it, but then also supporting the Duluth Folk School and the Makerspace and other community-oriented organizations that continue to build vibrancy and be that third space for individuals, was part of sort of the larger picture that also kind of coincided with the development of the Pocket Park.
I had a follow-up question there. For those of us, I think, who do this sort of work and quotes there, creating third places professionally, et cetera, it can feel like like we're threading a needle sometimes, and particularly what feels like a extraordinary tension between development and community. And I must say, often I'm like, well, who is it for? There's so much of what we're working to create in public-private partnerships, et cetera, that I'm like, I just don't understand like who this is for, if not for community. But I'm hoping to talk a little bit about what your experience has been with that tension. Like, do you observe that same tension? Do you feel that same tension? And how we navigate through or around that tension when we're trying to not only engage community, but ensure that community feels that sense of belonging in these places. One more quick question. Who is community?
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. Oh, those are all really good big questions that I reel with a lot, but I think our district does too. There's the big G word, right? Gentrification. That's the worry that we've had in providing the kind of support for development in Lincoln Park that we have. And so those initial investments in the bent paddle development, Arrow Stitch, I'm gonna forget people, so I shouldn't probably list anybody, but the Duluth Grill families and Frost River, those are sort of the initial monetary investments, but those were Duluthians. Those were residents saying, we want to build our business in our community. And here's a great spot with cheap property that we can, create this next level of what businesses look like. And so Lincoln Park was really built on those investments that were made. So when I think community in those initial days, that's what I think of, right? But what happens when people start beautifying a neighborhood and it's starting to look really nice is that then bigger, wealthier corporations come in and it begins to change the dynamics. And so I want to honor that and say, as somebody who's supposed to be representing the business district, I'm also looking up the hill into the neighborhood. And I'm thinking about the residents, and I'm thinking about how are we, again, I talked about those 3 organizations, all nonprofits that are along the strip there. That's intentional for community building and saying, you're not just somebody who lives here, but you're part of this district. But there's still the jokes about the $20 sandwich too, both those things do exist, and that's where that tension lies. And so I feel like it's my role to continue to ensure that there's a level of that scrappiness, that entrepreneurship, those crafters coming into our district, while also acknowledging that big residential development projects don't come from that, scrappiness. And both of those things need to coincide, or else we're gonna lose the soul of what Lincoln Park really is and what makes it special.
I wanted to come back to you, Mr. Banks, and ask a similar question about what culturally responsive public space means to you, again, in this context, socio-political context that we find ourselves in. And for both of you, how do we know when we have achieved this responsiveness? What are a former mayor talked about the research base with a little bit of a brow raise, if I caught it. And I feel some of that concern as well, that some of the things that we're working on have been researched to death, right? There's so much research, not a ton of experimentation. And then we start talking about things like KPIs, and but if you ask your neighbor, does this feel culturally responsive to you? Do you feel a sense of belonging here? Those very basic questions. I think that sometimes those answers might not align with the KPIs that we've set. So how do you all go about, again, interrogating if something is culturally responsive, and what feeling do you have when you say, okay, yes, we've achieved it, or at least we're on our way?
I think that Duluth, as I said earlier, I love Duluth. However, as an African heritage, African American person, we got a lot of work to do as it relates to culturally responsive spaces. The African American community owns nothing in Duluth. That's troubling to me, especially since our demographics from the 2020 census showed that the largest demographic or increase in population came from the African American community. So there were more people from the African American community moving here. Although, we have spaces, but we don't own those facilities, those buildings. And that's troubling, because it says you're here, but you're not really welcome here. And we can do better as a community. It's going to take all of us to do better. And I would be remiss if I didn't say these historical pieces. There are 2 individuals who were from Duluth. They are 2 of the most important people in the world. One's Alexander Miles. Do you know who he is? Alexander Miles, if you ride an elevator, how many ride an elevator? Raise your hand. Most people ride an elevator. He was from Duluth, African American, and he invented the mechanism to make the elevator run smoother. Duluth, Minnesota. He lived here for 25 years. He was the wealthiest, purported to be the wealthiest African American man in the Midwest. Duluth, Minnesota. The other person is Ethel Ray Nance. How many of you know who she is? one of the most important people on the planet. She was the first African-American female police officer in the state of Minnesota, working on the Minneapolis police force. She was the first African-American person to work for the Minnesota legislature as a stenographer. She was prolific as a writer, editor, etc., etc. She was a part of the Harlem Renaissance. She achieved more by age 25 than most people achieve by 70. She was from Duluth, Minnesota. Both African-American people. She was the secretary to the founder of the National NAACP, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Ethel Ray. That's why I love Duluth. But these things are not taught in our schools. The contributions of African American and other folks of color that came right from our community. That's where we're missing this stuff. And we're obligated to teach our kids what happens right here in our community so that they know that they can achieve greatness just as these two individuals achieved greatness, and they came from Duluth, Minnesota. So, what was the... I wanted to share some history, so I didn't want to forget that.
Well, actually, I want to amend my question a little bit and just note the call out. Since I met you yesterday, you know, we go way back, and there's a refrain about loving Duluth,
Yes.
which is a complicated feeling when a place doesn't feel like it loves you back, and it makes me think about belonging and patriotism and being American that we can unpack later. But I have a question that I wanted to follow up on because you talked about ownership. I was hoping you could unpack a little bit more. I think it's obvious why ownership is important, but I'd love you to say a bit more on why ownership is important.
So when we own our own spaces, because we know we are resilient people as African heritage people, but when we own our own spaces, we control what happens in those spaces, right? And so we don't have that kind of control here, right? Our kids need us, they need to see that we can own things. We can own buildings and structures and houses, et cetera, but we struggle there. And that's not just Duluth, but it's more pronounced in Duluth because there are so few of us in Duluth. We have great city leaders, we have great city councilors, and our mayor is doing some great things, but we need more. Right? We need to have ownership of our own buildings. We need to be able to have that so our kids can grow with that. What happens with our young African American people who are professionals, they live in Duluth for a short period of time and then they're gone. Because they're not supported. And so we have to have those mechanisms and those infrastructures in place so that folks want to stay here, especially our young people. I've seen so many young professionals leave within the last year or two. They've gone on to the Twin Cities and elsewhere. It would be great to have folks to stay in Duluth because of Duluth's potential. But if those opportunities aren't there, why would you stay here? That's the question.
So I think the area that I am most able to speak about is broadening the idea of culture a little bit and thinking about Well, first of all, I have to look at myself. Spaces generally are designed for people who look and move about the world like me. They are cis men who are white, who don't have a disability and are housed, right? And so when I think about spaces and how they're designed, I have to look at it from that lens, and anything that makes it more welcoming to more people that don't look and move about the world the way that I do is important to me. And so the two spaces that I have the pleasure to work in, because I have a transgender daughter who has a disability, is in those two communities, is with gender nonconforming people and individuals who move about the world with a disability or needing a mobility aid or any other way that isn't just walking up a flight of stairs. And so I think the only thing I can really add to what Henry's saying here is just that there's so many aspects of our identities that need to be built into placemaking and need to be identified and called out, and it needs to be all the different leaders in that room who largely are still cis white men who have a level of privilege and power in our community. And so we have to build that in and recognize it. And then the other piece of that then is who else is at the table making these decisions? Who is representative of all the different kinds of communities that are impacted by those big decisions, those big 150-year-old or 50-year investments that we're making as a city. When we decide how a sidewalk is going to look, when we decide what infrastructure is going to be put out there, I keep looking at the mirror when I say this, and I don't need to target you for this. I'm so sorry. Over here, no, because he knows this, and I know his heart, so I don't want to. I think that it's really, really important who we are putting at these tables making these decisions, and they can't all look like me in order to be culturally responsive.
Thank you for naming that and bringing those important considerations into the room. That is a place where certainly I know I've grown, and so I appreciate you especially saying it and naming it, and that I think is a way that we build the future that we really want to see. Is that it means a lot if Evelyn says it, but then RT says it and Cameron says it. So thank you for saying it. Sandman is coming again, so I have a final question for you all. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about safety in these third places and in these public spaces and how you think about them, how you think about ensuring safety in these places. And I think that safety can be a very loaded term, but however you all define safety. And then what are you feeling most hopeful about that these spaces that you all have been so instrumental in envisioning and bringing to life, what they can do for us in this particular time that we find ourselves in? Safety and hope.
So safety is really about making sure that people have what they need in order to navigate the world, and that's a huge amount of different kinds of things. And sometimes those things can be another level of tension and can be another level where we're having a hard time, but in order for people to be safe, they need the things that they need. And at the most basic levels, that's our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That's, food and clothing and those things, and a safe place to be is on that list too. And so I think it means having more people engaging in our communities, more people who are walking our communities, more people who, I think when we bypass neighborhoods, when we get in our car and we just zoom from one destination to another. I live in the East Hillside and I work in the Lincoln Park, and I zoom right around downtown every single day. And I think about it a lot because I'm like, boy, there needs to be reasons for me to want to be in downtown, because otherwise those are my two places. And when I think about hope, again, I just want to point to this room and say, I know a lot of you in this room, I know where your hearts are. I think we need to make a concerted effort in order to change the world at the level we have control over, which is here and now with the resources we have, and not depend on the rest of the world to fall in line and do the things that we need them to do for us.
All right. Safety, especially where the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial is located. Right on 2nd Avenue East and 1st Street, so not very far from here, is a concern. But I would tell you, of the unhoused people that may visit there, are some of the kindest people you'll ever interact with. All they may want you to do is say hello, and you can get a conversation started. And a lot of unhoused people visit the memorial I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't visited the memorial, it's located at 2nd Avenue East and 1st Street, please visit the memorial. Please interact with the people that may be there. As an African heritage man, safety is always a concern for me and people who look like me, because we are always the first target. And that's disrespectful, and that's unacceptable in any community. But I see it all the time. I've walked in downtown Duluth and walking while black and being pulled over by the police, not knowing who I am or who or what I represent. So safety is an issue. Safety is a concern. We all have to work together to make our community what it needs to be for everybody. I always say to folks, even unhoused people pay taxes, and we have to respect that. The hope is that we can do this together, but we have to be willing to do this thing together. Our school system, because I'm on the Duluth School Board, we have a lot of work to do on the Duluth School Board. Even though our graduation rates have gone up in every demographic, it's still not enough. It's going to take every one of us. That's where the hope lies, because we can do this. Duluth used to have amongst the best schools in the nation not too long ago. And Duluth was graduating all of its children on time and in good ways. So there's still hope out there. It's very difficult for me not to say that Duluth is a great place, because it is. But in order for us to make it an even better place, the hope is that we can do this, and we should.
Would you all join me in another round of applause? Again, back to RT for our next panelist.
Thank you, that was awesome. I want to now bring to the stage the current mayor of Duluth and a longtime friend of mine, and let's see, Vice President Garner Moffat from Superior. Are you here as well? There you are, right there. I'm sorry. Welcome them to the stage. I'm going to slip off to go back to my day job. Thank you. I think RT has to leave us, so how about a hand for him before he goes?
RT was supposed to do my part, so I can keep it. But Andrea, why don't you tell us about the microphone here? I'm out.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Andrea Crouse. I'm the Community Development Manager here at Zeitgeist, and thank you all for being here today. Before we leave, we want to make sure we give time to hear from visionaries in our community, and that's going to be all of you. So when you leave, we're going to want to hear from you at the tables that are outside. We have the Library Foundation, Zeitgeist is set up, the Metropolitan Interstate Council, Transportation Planning, Vibrant Streets Duluth, all organizations that are looking at transforming community and want to hear your vision and your voice. So please talk to the folks at the tables. But it's also important to hear the vision for our community from our leaders. They're the ones who help us activate some of these spaces. Now we want to make sure it's informed by community voice and centering those that are going to be using it, but we can't do it without leadership support too. So that's why we've invited Mayor Reinert, Garner Moffat. I'm Grateful that you're here. Mayor Payne unfortunately had to be in Madison today, but these things come up. So we're super happy that you're both here. Garner, if you'd be willing to say a little bit about the vision that Superior has for creating third spaces, how to go about that, and how you engage community members in that process. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, sure, thanks for having me. Sorry Mayor Payne couldn't be here today. We're fighting a big battle with our utility company, and he went down to Madison to work with the legislature today. So I was really grateful when he called me yesterday so they could have up to 45 minutes to talk about whatever I want. So I decided to leave my day job for a little while and come on over. I'm glad you guys are in for this. Buckle up. Really, I went to school for community development 20 years ago at St. Cloud State, and so placemaking has been something that's really passionate to me. I just wanted to talk about a couple things today. I read an article this morning online, just a little brief thing from Jeff Ziegler. He does the Revitalize or Die posts, and he wrote a book called Your City is Sick. He was talking about camping and how grateful he was to have the weekend to go camping with his friends. And then when he was thinking about it, it wasn't really about it wasn't about the camping. It was about going somewhere and having that third place, right? And like spending time with people that you want to spend time with, and putting your phone down and being able to just kind of engage on a human level and enjoy the moment and enjoy the place. And so there's something special when we think about like, what feelings does that bring up when you go camping, and like, why can't we have that all the time in town here? And there are some places that are like that already, and there's other places I think that are primed for those opportunities. And I prefer to think of it less as nodes of like, here's a community activated space and there's a community activated space, but it's placemaking everywhere. And so I know nobody parked here in the building, right? And so as you leave today and like walk back to wherever you're going, your office or your car somewhere or whatever, like stop and take a moment and look at where you're at and think about like, what are the sounds you're hearing and the smells and the feeling, and just like look around you for color and just like plant life and everything that can make our spaces what they are, right? I was going to speak briefly about activated spaces and the public-private partnership. I had the joy of serving on the Lincoln Park Business Group board with Cam. Really enjoyed that time with him and got to help out with that Corner Park project, and I'm so glad he talked about that today. That was really a great project. I think that allowed a lot of people to kind of provide input in different ways and use their strengths to kind of create a shared community space. And I think people were concerned when we did that project that like, it's just gonna get run down right away, or the people that are there that we perceive causing problems now are just gonna be there and it's gonna be horrible. And I go by pretty frequently and I see like families enjoying it and people having an ice cream cone or grabbing their to-go food because one of the restaurants is full and they're eating on the picnic tables there. There's a stage so you can have music and events. There's artwork there, and it's like a place with both trees and artwork and a gathering space. And so like, I think it's really a great example of like a micro example of what we can do in Duluth and in Superior. I've started working on a project over there. The mayor was very supportive. I went through the Leadership Douglas County program last year, and we created a space called The Lot over on Banks Avenue. It's kind of tucked behind our downtown a little bit, or in our downtown, depending on how you perceive the boundaries. But it's off of Tower, so could be out of downtown for some of you. But it's an old parking lot, and I really wanted to create like my group wanted to create like a gathering space, exactly what we're talking about here, like a third space where people can just go hang out and exist, and there's no expectations of money or anything. You can just be and just enjoy. And I really wanted to use a lot on Tower Avenue, and the mayor said, no, I need that lot right now for something else. So take this lot over here, this parking lot on Banks. And I was a little thrown off at first, and we were like, well, let's punt with it and we'll go see what we have. So we went over to really get a good feel for it, and it's not much, or it wasn't much. You can take these spaces and they can be absolutely nothing and awful, and you can turn them into something neat. We put up a huge stage there, we have bands there, Make Music Days coming up soon. Hope you'll come over across the bridge and check that out. Free music, and we have food vendors there, and the farmers market's there, and it was just an empty parking lot. And so that space is just kind of in the beginning stages, and I think there's a lot more work to do there, but it just goes to show that those spaces can pop up for whatever. When I think about placemaking, I think about radical hospitality, and so it's really about bringing everybody in and including people and getting their viewpoints and understanding the history of the why behind the things that they think. And so I think about radical hospitality as kind of that first step, and how can we build things from a place of hope and support for everyone in our community, and not make choices out of fear or exclusion for people or things that are different than us. And I think when we look at things from an additive standpoint, like RT mentioned, instead of a deficit standpoint, we can do really great things. And it doesn't have to be the this or that. It can be the yes and, right? And so bringing people together really allows us to do that work and create that positive movement forward. I should mention a few of the things we're doing in Superior briefly, because you asked. We're installing public restrooms. People need to go to the bathroom, and this is part of radical hospitality, right? I don't know if anyone has figured out the not going to the bathroom thing. I'd love to hear how you do it. It takes time, but we're putting in public bathrooms in a lot of our parks and other places, and it's people have needs, and we're going to meet them. We're hiring social workers. Our library has a social worker. The police department has social workers, multiple. And it's not cost effective to hire police for everything, and it's not the right tool. You can do a lot of things with a hammer, but sometimes you need a screwdriver. Sometimes you need a whatever, a pencil and paper, right? And so there's different tools for different jobs, right? And so it's cheaper, and it's, I think, the right thing to do. We're hiring social workers. We're installing municipal broadband in some of our poorest neighborhoods right now. We're sick of being taken advantage of by fiber optic, the lack of fiber optic connectivity in our neighborhood. The coax cable, not so good, right? It's old, it's really expensive, so we're targeting our poorest neighborhoods first. We're putting in broadband, and I think they're going to be able to get service in about a month for about $45 for gigabit service. It's going to take us a little while to get the whole city, but we're working really hard at doing that. We're offering public art grants, both for placemaking, for murals, for sculpture, and then also for events. Somebody offered to do ukulele classes for the community for free. The city's paying them to do that. We're paying for murals, we're paying for stuff. People deserve art in our communities, and they deserve to feel welcome and included, and that's stuff for everybody, right? We're doing small business grants every single quarter through the Planning Commission. We also just started recently allowing businesses to apply for pre-designed work, included as getting paid for by the grant dollars. That means if you're poor, but you have a building, but you can't quite get those first steps to get the project going, we can help you get the drawings put together. We'll help pay for that so that you can get the financing to get the rest of the project going, right? So you don't need money to get started. We're going to help you from the bottom up. For adaptive reuse, we need more housing, and we need to get some of our historic buildings reused. So we're working on that. And we're redoing our zoning code. We're adding form-based code because we want our zoning code to be easier for developers and for our staff, but also the focus isn't on what's going on inside the building so much. It's about, are you bothering the neighbors, right? And so we're going to simplify our zoning code so that that's simple for everybody, and should help us create places that interact with the public realm better. And that includes landscaping and like the frontage, the facade, and all of those things like noise levels and stuff, but caring less about what people are doing inside their buildings. And all of this is a focus on government as a means of cooperation and providing for the common welfare, right? Like that's what government is. There's a concept of palaces for the people and doing together what we can to loan and creating those spaces and places that are for everybody and sharing our resources. So this is the vision for creating a sense of belonging, a sense of place in our community. And I have to say it's incremental. And I think it's important to recognize that too, and so it's about the little things. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed and powerless. It's also easy to pick up garbage if you see it, or to say hello to somebody on the street, or to hold the door for somebody, or to pick a weed if you're standing next to a planter and you're waiting. You know, like sometimes things seem really difficult, and they can be, but there are also small things that can be easy and we can do if we work together.
There was a starter question in there somewhere, right?
Sorry. I was told 45 minutes.
Yeah, and like I always like I never want to go after Mayor Payne, and now I don't want to go after Garner Moffat either. So, but I think Andrea knows we had this conversation last year. You know, I come to something like this, and my greatest joy is to sit and listen to everybody else, because in this odd introvert reflector in a very extroverted role, and so I learn best by getting to hear everybody else. So to everyone who's had a chance to teach us today, and I will say to both Cal and to Henry, now it makes sense, because you're both friends who will say I love you and mean it, and then tell me what I'm doing wrong or how I'm disappointing you, because you want better, just as you do for our community. I love Duluth, but I want better, and heard that in both of your comments. But you know, Andrea, when I think about ThirdSpaces, and I think about what is the city, you know, joining you last year was still relatively new in the role and trying to figure out exactly what the role is and how it works in our system. And I should acknowledge we have 4 of our councilors here today: President Tamane, Councilor Kennedy, Councilor Randorf, and Councilor Lynn Nephew. And you know, to those folks, those are very part-time jobs. They all have jobs, they have families, they have other things going on. So to take this time out in the middle of the day to be here says a lot. And I know we have a lot of our staff here as well. James Gittmeyer in the front row, who, if you don't know James, everybody knows James. But, right, he's a planner who also understands the built environment and how the built environment informs how we move around in it. And I think a year after we had this conversation in 2024, probably my biggest learning is, you know, the city's job is to try and work on those built environments. And we can be stuck in this mode of, well, this is what we do, and so we're going to keep doing it. And in fact, we're going to make it, you know, more built. And then that just creates more barriers for folks. So, you know, for me, having a chance to learn first from the folks involved with WeWalk, who I know many are here, and now Vibrant Streets, that really kind of, and I don't know if Alice Tibbetts is here or not, but Alice, I'm now halfway through Strong Towns, so I'm plugging away. I don't get a lot of free time to read, but it's just been revolutionary and revelationary. Can I say that? In terms of how are towns supposed to work? How did they historically evolve? How do we lower barriers so that we can evolve in place, instead of saying, you know, we're going to create all these built structures that try to force people into places. The next book on my reading list is Abundance, because I want to figure out how are we using some of these soft tools to try to keep people in certain places. At the beginning, when we were talking about ThirdSpaces, and Henry, we were sitting next to each other, and I could see you nodding. ThirdSpaces have always been there. It's who gets invited, right? And who feels welcome. And then how do you create them if you're not invited and not welcome? And I think the city, capital C city, has a big role in thinking about that within both our planning environment as well as our public works environment. And so, I know there's many in the room that are passionate around our sustainability officer position. And if you haven't done that, I hope you will take a look at how the position was revised when we had an opportunity to do that, because it now integrates those two things. It is about both how we want to be progressive in what we do, but also how we want to inform our built environment and how we do it. Because sustainability and resiliency from a city standpoint is also what can we reasonably ask people to pay for and continue to carry. And a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to be at a Great Lakes conference with a lot of other mayors. It turns out plus or minus 100,000 people is about the norm around the Great Lakes. In a city that's approaching 150 years old, which Duluth will be in 2 years, is also about the norm, and post-industrial is kind of the norm. And so a lot of conversation about, well, what do you do with 500 miles of streets? What do you do with 500 miles of utilities under the ground that are all approaching 100 years old? As well as have the resources to address those things in a way that homeowners can afford to do. And I think what is fantastic about what a group like this can do, because frankly, we're 900 people. Like, what I've learned a year in is that the capital C city of Duluth kind of moves in its own direction, whether anybody who works there wants it to or not. It just keeps chugging along in certain places. So kudos to James. I know Jen Moses is here. Our leaders who really are trying to nudge that behemoth in a different direction. But we cannot be as nimble, and we cannot be as connected, and we cannot be as responsive as people in this room can be. So to everyone who is here, who has helped and continues to help inform my thinking, our counselors' thinking, and each other's thinking and learning, that makes a real difference within our community, because those then end up translating themselves into policy. And I'll take one example that I'm especially proud of, especially for our engineering team, who is not always the most flexible or the most nimble of folks. They're engineers. Adam, no offense. Adam's not one of them. Adam's actually been really helpful to me in thinking about how our built infrastructure informs the way that land is used around it. But the redo of Skyline near Anchor really was citizen-driven, the result of, unfortunately, several tragic accidents. But as citizens came forward and said, we want to try and do something different. We want to have something that's not about cars, but about everyone's ability to experience one of the most panoramic views in our entire city. And those who, I know many here came to the 3 public meetings we had, not embraced right away by all of our staff. But what is there now, and there's still room certainly for improvement, really is pretty remarkable. I live close by there, so I had an opportunity the first weekend it was up to go run through there, and it was the safest I've ever felt as a pedestrian taking that in. And then it turns out like, oh wow, here is a model that we could replicate elsewhere in the community and be inviting of both. I think, Cam, you were saying of all of our abilities to use a space, not just those who have the financial ability to be in a vehicle, taking in that space. So, when I think about ThirdSpaces, they're both built and also created. Because in a community like Duluth, where we have 10,000 wooded acres, we pride ourselves on our ability to engage the outdoors. I will just say to this group, and frankly to any group, Duluth's competitive advantage, no offense Fargo, is not 18 softball fields in a sports complex. Our competitive advantage is 10,000 wooded acres and hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails, and the ability, as RT said, for everyone to embrace what we all love, the big lake. So, our ability as the city to partner with groups and individuals represented here and think about what makes great spaces is always our challenge.
Let's give everyone a hand here. big thanks to Mayor Reinert, to Garner Moffat, thanks for joining us. Evelyn, Burnett, here from Cleveland, ThirdSpace. Pam and Henry, folks locally that are showing how to developing church spaces. Thank you. We want you to join us. So our next step is to move out to the atrium. We have more snacks and appetizer beverages and folks that want to hear from you. So please engage with the tables out there, learn a little bit about the Duluth history and what kind of vision we can build based on where we have been and have a stronger Twin Ports. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to talking with you out in the atrium.